The sea-to-sky corridor is a place rich in diverse geologic history. From an underwater glacial moraine in the Howe Sound Fjord to the Squamish Chief, one of the largest monoliths or single pieces of granodiorite in the world, to the volcanoes of Garibaldi, Black Tusk, and Whistler, the sea-to-sky has it all, especially for someone like myself, always oohing and awing at the unique rock formations pushed up thousands of meters into the sky through tectonic forces and volcanism. But just as there are forces lifting those peaks up, there are bound to be forces pulling them down. Less than 2 years ago, the Joffre Peak slide caught the attention of every outdoor enthusiast in the sea-to-sky corridor. In 2008, a cliff face collapsed across the sea-to-sky highway. Rubble Creek on Mount Garibaldi slowly erodes away at the barrier containing Garibaldi Lake, while the city of Squamish grows beneath its impending release. Of course, these events occur over the course of millions of years of formation and erosion, and because of how infrequently these destructive events occur, we continue to live and develop in the path of these hazards. However, some destructive events at scales larger than most can comprehend have occurred much more recently than people might assume. This is Mystery Creek, the site of a rock avalanche that sent boulders the size of houses down the Green River Valley and up onto a bedrock shelf on the opposite side. If you've ever driven from Whistler to Pemberton, you've passed within a few meters of its debris. The timeline, scale, and proximity to our built landscape makes Mystery Creek a site that shows the importance of understanding these geologic changes. Therefore, it has been chosen as a geoheritage site for the aspiring Sea-to-Sky UNESCO Global Geopark. And instead of running from these potential changes, I asked, how can we take inspiration from the geology to influence how we build on and around the ever-changing landscape? Geoparks exist around the world, each addressing a diverse geologic history in unique ways. Two examples stood out to me for how their design and even their construction methods address the features in the surrounding landscape. The first is the Buhayes Geology Park. The building's design took inspiration from ammonite fossils, the shape abstracted to suit a purpose in the design, following the principle given by architect Emily Childs. Its raised structure and off-site modular construction considered the physical footprint of this design, avoiding disruption to as much of the geology as possible. Another in Taiwan created direct access to hoodoos on a coastal outcrop, using pathways and platforms to guide an experience before blending those paths directly into the rugged outcrop itself. This design considered where it was necessary to create the experience for the visitor, where the geology provided that experience, and how the two could blend together. These two examples use the same principle of addressing the specific site and applying geologic findings to the design. I did the same at Mystery Creek, beginning with understanding the site itself. The geologic history of melting tectonic plates, cooling magma, and movement associated with coastal BC's tectonic boundary led to a rock avalanche releasing 40 million cubic meters of rock into the valley. In fact, the 2010 slide at Mount Meager releasing 45 million cubic meters offers a close comparison, and the more recent Joffre slide that shed only 5 million cubic meters shows the magnitude of this type of event. The local site at Mystery Creek offers a stunning location to show off the dramatic geologic history. With that goal, I designed a geologic interpretive center using the mountains, rocks, and minerals at Mystery Creek as inspiration. I mentioned that we should avoid building in hazardous locations, and now I'm suggesting a design placed immediately underneath a slide path? Yes, given the magnitude of this event that far surpasses the size of any nearby, and the protection offered from the existing debris, I believe that the likelihood of one even larger in the same spot is low. I wanted to choose the most dramatic and difficult to navigate location to show that even places like these have the potential for the appropriate development. For that idea to come across to an everyday visitor, I wanted to imagine a building and trails that border immediately against a seemingly unnavigable landscape. Before I show you my design, I wanted to show you the rock avalanche and some of the impressive characteristics of the area that inspired me. On my first arrival to Mystery Creek, it seriously lived up to its name. Sitting on a ridge with steep valleys on either side, the field of debris felt like an alien landscape, where boulders larger than houses were dropped into place. Across the valley lay a bare slope, with only a single waterfall to emphasize its magnitude. Using a series of drone images, the most accessible way to navigate the site, I saw a trend between two scales of debris. As this debris was deposited upon a bedrock shelf, I estimate that the smaller debris was deposited from later slides of a much smaller magnitude, creating this sudden shift from boulders to small debris. The fractures, I presume which were caused by regional tectonics during the rock's formation, left large, flat blocks scattered throughout the debris. One on the far end of the site appears nearly perfectly square and is among the largest single pieces of debris on site. Finding access to these views, features, and rocks played a role in my decision-making while laying out my site plan. I went back to Mystery Creek earlier this month to see it again after a winter buried in snow. While I could climb my way through the debris, I knew that I wanted to imagine an accessible pathway winding its way through these boulders to show the scale and allow direct up-close contact for visitors to the site. Interaction with single boulders gives context to how large this event was, and views and explanations of their composition provides a view into the history of these rocks' formation. Even closer than what we can see on site, when viewed through a microscope, minerals can be seen and each tells a story. For example, this feldspar mineral shows zoning on the left, telling us that it experienced a changing environment as it cooled. The pattern of aligned micas on the right offers evidence of a mixed magma origin. These visual clues in the minerals tell the history of these rocks millions of years before they were near the surface, and can be represented in a design for visitors to learn from. To apply these findings to a design, I was inspired by architect Emily Childs, who designed a geologic interpretive center in its own unique surroundings. She emphasized the need to use geologic findings, both visual and conceptual, and obscure them until they suit a design purpose. At Mystery Creek, the flowing and aligned patterns in the minerals inspired designs from the way that the paths would wind and twist between large boulders, the same way that minerals in the magma float around one another. The boundaries of the debris offered locations to develop in an otherwise inaccessible landscape, and mimic the border between minerals in the mixed magmas. For the building itself, a construction process called rammed earth would create the same appearance as that found in the rock, while using the local debris itself as a construction material in that process. This creates a direct connection between the design and the history of the landscape. The faulting and layering of the rocks in the mountains, and the toppling motion of the angular, blocky debris of the rock avalanche inspired a tilted, multi-unit interpretive center. In the same way that magmas float around rocky inclusions during mixing, I created pathways that wind their way through the boulders. Suspending these trails between the boulders would allow visitors to go on the same adventure I went on to see the awe-inspiring scale of this debris, and I mocked up a rendering of what that experience of moving through the boulders would look like. These examples of the design choices that I made in this project show extreme visual examples of how we can develop around unique and hazardous landscapes, and how we can use the characteristics of those to make a strong connection between what we build and the rich geologic history of the places we build it. While I'm not recommending adopting every design choice I've shown here, I believe that there is opportunity everywhere for development to specifically address what its purpose is and how it can best address the risks and show off the history of the site where it will be. With such diverse geologic history in the Sea to Sky corridor and ongoing development, it is important that in every site location and type of structure that both the beauty and hazards are appropriately addressed.